The shadow in the basement. It was a quiet Sunday evening, and I was home alone while my family was out of town visiting relatives. I had spent the day catching up on chores and decided to relax with a good book before bed. The house was eerily silent, with only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. As I sat in the living room, I suddenly heard a strange noise coming from the basement. It sounded like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I froze, listening intently. The noise stopped as abruptly as it had started. I tried to dismiss it as the house settling or perhaps a stray animal that had somehow found its way in. But the noise came again, this time louder and more distinct. It was a slow, deliberate scraping sound, like metal against concrete. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. Grabbing a flashlight and a baseball bat for good measure, I made my way to the basement door. The basement was always a creepy place, filled with old furniture, dusty boxes, and the occasional cobweb. I slowly descended the stairs, the wooden steps creaking under my weight. The basement was dimly lit by a single overhead bulb, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. I shone the flashlight around, trying to find the source of the noise. The basement appeared empty, but the feeling of unease grew stronger. I walked towards the far corner, where an old rusted metal cabinet stood. As I approached, I noticed the cabinet door was slightly ajar. With a trembling hand, I pulled the door open, revealing a collection of old tools and gardening supplies. Just as I was about to close it, I heard the scraping noise again, this time right behind me. I spun around, shining the flashlight wildly, but saw nothing. My heart was pounding, and I decided it was best to leave the basement. As I turned to head back upstairs, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a dark, shadowy figure standing at the bottom of the stairs. It was barely visible in the dim light, but I could make out its tall, slender shape. I took a step back, my mind racing with fear. The shadow figure didn't move, but I could feel its gaze fixed on me. Summoning all my courage, I shouted, "Who's there?" There was no response, just an oppressive silence. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the figure. As I reached the stairs, the figure seemed to dissolve into the darkness, disappearing from sight. I raced up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind me. I locked it and leaned against it, my heart still racing. I tried to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe it was a trick of the light or my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew it was something more. I called my parents and told them what had happened. They were concerned, but assured me that it was probably nothing to worry about. That night, I slept with the lights on, and the basement door securely locked. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, and every little noise set my nerves on edge. The next day, I decided to do some research on the house's history, hoping to find some explanation for the shadowy figure. I discovered that the previous owner had been an elderly man who had lived alone for many years. He was a recluse and rarely left the house. According to the neighbors, he had been a bit of an oddball, always muttering to himself and keeping strange hours. He had died in the basement, and his body wasn't found for several days. The knowledge of the man's death in the basement only added to my unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that his restless spirit still lingered in the house. Over the next few weeks, I continued to hear strange noises coming from the basement, but I never saw the shadow figure again. Eventually, my family returned, and I felt a sense of relief. I told them about my experiences, and while they were sympathetic, they were also skeptical. We decided to have the house blessed by a priest, hoping to bring some peace to the restless spirit. The strange occurrences gradually subsided, but the memory of that night stayed with me. I never ventured into the basement alone again, and the sight of shadows always sent a shiver down my spine. The shadow in the basement had left its mark on me, a chilling reminder of the unknown and the things that go bump in the night. Before we start the second story, please subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying this video. Also, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. The mysterious knocking. It was a cold and rainy Friday night when I found myself home alone for the first time in months. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me in charge of the house. I was looking forward to a relaxing evening of binge-watching my favorite shows and enjoying some much-needed solitude. I had just settled onto the couch with a bowl of popcorn when I heard the first knock. It was faint and seemed to come from the front door. I paused my show and listened, but the sound didn't repeat. I brushed it off as my imagination and resumed watching TV. A few minutes later, the knock came again, this time louder and more insistent. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I got up and cautiously approached the front door, peering through the peephole. The porch was empty, and the rain was falling heavily, creating a misty haze. I opened the door slightly and called out, "Hello, is anyone there?" There was no response, just the sound of the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. I closed the door and double-checked the lock before returning to the living room. As I sat down, my phone buzzed with a text message from my friend Sarah. "Hey, heard you're home alone. Want to hang out?" Relieved by the distraction, I replied, "Sure, come over." While waiting for Sarah, I decided to make some tea. As I filled the kettle, I heard the knocking again, this time coming from the back door. My heart raced as I slowly walked towards the kitchen door. Through the window, I could see the backyard, dimly lit by the porch light. There was no one there. I took a deep breath and opened the back door, peering into the darkness. The rain had intensified, and the wind howled through the trees. I called out again, but there was no answer. I closed the door and locked it, feeling a growing sense of unease. Just as I turned away from the door, my phone buzzed again. It was Sarah. "I'm here." I felt a wave of relief and hurried to the front door to let her in, but when I opened it, no one was there. I stepped outside, confused, and called her name. The only response was the rain and the distant roll of thunder. Panic started to set in as I texted Sarah, "Where are you? I don't see you." Her reply came almost instantly. "What do you mean? I'm still at home. I haven't left yet." My blood ran cold as I realized that whoever was knocking wasn't Sarah. I quickly locked the door and ran to the living room, grabbing my phone to call the police. As I dialed, the knocking resumed, this time louder and more frantic. It echoed through the house, coming from all directions: the front door, the back door, the windows. It was as if someone or something was trying to get in from every possible entrance. The dispatcher answered, and I frantically explained my situation. They assured me that an officer was on the way and instructed me to stay on the line. I grabbed a kitchen knife and huddled in the corner of the living room, my eyes darting around the room, expecting to see a figure appear at any moment. The knocking continued, relentless and unyielding. It was as if the house itself was alive, the walls reverberating with the sound. I could hear the rain pounding against the roof, the wind howling, and my own rapid breathing. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens approaching. The knocking stopped abruptly, and the house fell silent. A few minutes later, there was a loud knock on the front door, followed by a voice announcing, "Police!" I cautiously opened the door to find two officers standing on the porch, their expressions serious. They searched the house and the surrounding area, but found no signs of anyone. The officers suggested that it might have been a prank, or my imagination playing tricks on me, given the stormy weather. They offered to stay nearby for the rest of the night, just in case. I thanked them and tried to calm my nerves. But the feeling of unease lingered. I couldn't shake the memory of the relentless knocking, and the sense that someone or something had been trying to get in. That night I slept with the lights on, my mind racing with fear and unanswered questions. The next day my parents returned, and I recounted the events to them. They were sympathetic but also skeptical, suggesting that it might have been the storm playing tricks on my senses. But deep down, I knew what I had experienced was real, and the memory of that terrifying night stayed with me long after the storm had passed. Months passed, and gradually, the intense fear began to subside. The memory of that night still lingered, but it no longer dominated my every thought. I learned to live with the unease, to manage it, but it never truly went away. Every time I heard a noise in the night or saw a shadow move in the corner of my eye, the fear would flare up again, reminding me of how vulnerable we can be, even in the safety of our own homes. Even now, years later, the memory of that night still lingers. The image of the man standing by the back door trying to get in is forever etched in my mind. It's a reminder that safety is often an illusion, and that danger can come knocking when we least expect it. I still double-check the locks before going to bed, and I keep my phone close by, just in case. The experience changed me, made me more cautious, more aware of the fragility of the bubble we call home. I've shared this story with a few close friends and family members, hoping that by speaking it aloud, I might be able to lessen its hold on me. Each time, they listen with wide eyes and shared fear, understanding the terror of that night. But no matter how many times I tell it, the memory remains vivid, a dark chapter in the story of my life. Ultimately, the experience taught me to appreciate the moments of true safety and comfort, to cherish the times when the world feels secure. And while the fear may never fully go away, it serves as a reminder to stay vigilant, to protect myself and those I love, and to never take the illusion of safety for granted. The stranger in the window. When I was 16, my parents decided to take a weekend trip, leaving me home alone for the first time. I was thrilled about the freedom, planning to spend the time watching movies, playing video games, and indulging in junk food. I saw it as a mini vacation, a chance to enjoy some solitude and relaxation without any interruptions. Little did I know, the weekend would turn into a nightmare I would never forget. On the first night, I stayed up late watching a horror movie marathon. The storm outside only added to the eerie atmosphere. Around midnight, I heard a strange noise coming from outside. It sounded like someone was walking around the side of the house. I paused the movie and listened carefully, but the noise stopped. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just an animal, or perhaps the wind. A few hours later, I decided to call it a night. As I was drifting off to sleep, I heard the noise again. This time, it was louder and closer. I got up and looked out the window, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness. The backyard was pitch black, and the only light came from the flickering street lamp at the end of our driveway. I decided to check the security cameras my dad had installed around the house. I went downstairs to the living room where the monitor was set up. As I scanned the footage, my heart nearly stopped. There, in the backyard, was a man standing by the back door. He was dressed in dark clothes, with a hood covering his face. He seemed to be trying to pick the lock. Panic set in. I grabbed my cell phone and called 911, explaining the situation in a trembling voice. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on their way and told me to stay on the line. I watched the monitor, my eyes glued to the screen, praying the man would leave before he managed to get inside. The man continued to fumble with the lock for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he seemed to give up and started to walk around the side of the house. I heard a noise from the kitchen and realized he was trying to get in through the window. I ran to the kitchen and locked the window, hoping he wouldn't be able to break it. I could hear the sound of footsteps outside the window, and then a tapping noise. My heart pounded as I listened to the sound of glass being scratched. I tried to stay calm, listening for any sign that the police had arrived. The seconds felt like hours as I stood there, clutching a kitchen knife, my only weapon. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the sound of sirens approaching. The footsteps outside stopped, and I ran to the front door to let the officers in. They quickly searched the yard and the surrounding area, but found no sign of the intruder. They assured me they would patrol the neighborhood for the rest of the night. The police stayed with me until my parents returned the next day. They checked the security footage and took my statement, but they never caught the man who tried to break in. The thought that he was still out there somewhere haunted me for a long time. I couldn't shake the feeling that he might return. My parents installed additional security measures, including stronger locks and more cameras, but I never felt completely safe in that house again. Every creak and rustle made me jump, and I couldn't sleep without checking the windows and doors multiple times. The once comforting walls of my home had turned into a cage of anxiety and fear. In the weeks that followed, I found myself growing increasingly paranoid. I would double-check the locks before going to bed and make sure all the curtains were drawn tight. I even started carrying my phone with me everywhere, just in case I needed to call for help again. My friends noticed the change in me and tried to reassure me, but the fear had taken root deep inside. One evening, a few weeks after the incident, I was sitting in the living room with my best friend, Sarah. We were trying to have a normal night, watching a comedy movie and eating popcorn, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every now and then, I would glance at the security monitor, half expecting to see the shadowy figure lurking outside again. As the movie ended, Sarah turned to me and said, "You know, maybe it was just a one-time thing. Maybe he was just some random guy looking for an easy target, and now that the police are involved, he won't come back." I nodded, wanting to believe her, but the image of the man standing by the back door, trying to get in, was burned into my mind. "I hope you're right," I replied, forcing a smile. "But I can't help feeling like he's still out there, watching." That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the events over and over in my mind. I wondered who the man was, and what he wanted. Was he a thief, a stalker, or something even more sinister? The not knowing was the worst part. It left my imagination to run wild, conjuring up all sorts of terrifying scenarios.